I've been working at the Grand Sinclair Hotel, at least that's what I'll always call it, in the heart of the historical district for nearly a decade now. I've been with them since the beginning, and it's fair to say that there's something that lingers within these grand walls. Plenty of guests have reported as much. Though many guests have checked in and checked out without ever noticing it, as an employee, I've had my fair share of experiences, and I'm convinced that this place is haunted. The first sign for me came early, unexplained sounds echoing through the hallways. This was during the dead of night. Clearly, no guests roaming the halls or even awake at that hour. These types of auditory experiences aren't only experienced by me. Others hear them too, mainly staff. One of our maids, probably my 3rd year at the hotel, told me that she heard sounds outside of the rooms when she was cleaning, often. She described hearing the very specific sound of someone running their fingers across the wall. She would then expect to see someone pass by the open doorway, only no one ever showed. The hallways were always empty. Eventually, she stopped checking. This was the same woman who told me that sometimes things would get moved on her cleaning cart when she'd be cleaning rooms, specifically the top floors, 16 and 17. She absolutely believed in ghosts and used to say that the building was very alive. Then you have those who have stayed at the hotel for extended periods of time. Some of these guests would report the very same sound, the sound of someone running their fingers across the walls. Hearing the reports, it's almost like the guests aren't really sure what to report, just a noise they can't explain, but they always try to explain it, and it's always the same description. I've only ever taken a few of those reports, but I'm one in a staff of over 30, and I often wonder how many people don't report this sound. To this day, I still have no real explanation for this one. The next thing I want to talk about is what I consider my first real experience. The first one that I couldn't just explain away as a guest who was just a night owl, or really any guest at all. I heard the very distinct sound of horses trotting. The trotting started from what sounded like far away, but then started to speed up, getting louder for just a moment before ceasing altogether. I swear on all that is holy, I know the sound of trotting horses quite well. I just have no idea where it came from in this instance. It sounded like they were quite literally trotting through the hallways and into the lobby, which, of course, cannot be the case since, I didn't see any horses. Very strange, yet very real. I only heard that sound the one time in the lobby, but I haven't stopped thinking about it since, and I'm always waiting to hear it again. Something I do experience quite frequently are the inexplicable cold spots. Walking down certain hallways, the temperature abruptly drops, and you feel as if an invisible presence suddenly brushes past you. Hair raises on the back of your neck, the feeling of unease washing over you, the whole thing. I have personally experienced this more than once, and not always the same spot. These places, these areas, it's not where ventilation is heavy or even present. No real or functional reason to experience these things, they just happen. The thing about them, too, is you just can't really ignore it. Whatever it is, it wants you to know it's there, where others don't seem to notice you at all. Possibly the most chilling encounters happen in the old ordnance elevator. There were times when I was operating the lift and the doors would simply open on a floor that nobody called for. I really didn't appreciate that happening. I don't run the lift anymore, but when I did and this would happen, I would imagine a woman standing there in front of me, a figure draped in a sort of tattered something or rather, hollow eyes. Then I'd suddenly snap out of it when the doors would slam shut, leaving me with a sense of inexplicable terror. Each time this happened, I knew the woman wasn't real, but as the doors were slamming, I also knew that I was seeing something else. It was the backs of several people, 4, maybe 5 men in suits. I'd watch as this group of feet rounded the corner and disappeared. I would hear something that I couldn't understand being called amongst the men. It was always the same split-second visual, and it happened more than a couple of times. They weren't doing anything wrong, but I knew they weren't real. Not anymore, anyway. In the past, they must have walked that route 1,000 times. I wonder often if that's what I'm seeing and hearing. Moments frozen in time, destined to be repeated or possibly experienced by someone else. One of my favorites are the stories of the shadows dancing in the ballroom. They've always fascinated me. I experience the sensation of being watched in there, usually when I'm alone in the ballroom. Strangely, though, I've also felt like I was watching others. Shadows really do dance along the perimeter of the room. I can't explain it, and it's not all the time, but it happens. Enough times to where the ballroom had to start being locked, figuring that would resolve the reports of people dancing or utilizing the ballroom after hours. But even still, janitorial staff frequently reports the sound of hushed voices filling the circumference of the room. I've never heard it, but at this point, I absolutely believe it. There's just too many strange things that have happened for me to assume that something else is impossible. I guess it's all these things that make me question the legitimacy of hauntings, meaning anything is possible. Had I not experienced things myself, I may not believe any of these things. But reoccurring encounters, the countless stories shared by guests and staff, it's hard not to be convinced that the Grand St. Clair Hotel is more than just a historic landmark. It's a place where the spirits of the past remain, and it makes me think about the times before this place was a hotel. What kinds of stories happened all around here, and where do all those spirits reside? I think history has a way of forever etching itself into the foundations around it, and I think that includes the hotel's very foundation. The eerie atmosphere, the unexplainable phenomena, it's enough to make even the most skeptical believe in the paranormal, I think. So if you ever find yourself in Fort Worth, make sure to check into the Grand St. Clair to experience the feeling for yourself. No, really, you should. It is a stunningly beautiful place to experience, haunted or not. My second year of college, I started dating a guy that owned a dive bar near the university. His name was Jake. On a Sunday morning, my phone would ring with a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail, but it almost instantly started ringing again, with the same number. When this happened a third time, I answered it. On the other line is a woman named Gretchen. Calm and steady was the tone that she used when she advised me Jake was her husband. Gretchen's anger wasn't towards me. She'd assumed correctly when asking about my knowledge of their marriage. I had no clue. I was completely caught off guard, hurt and mad. Gretchen held the same feelings, but tenfold, and rightfully so. She asked if I could meet up with her. I asked when, and she said now. Then the door intercom on my apartment beeped with a static hiss. The voice I heard through my phone was now again speaking to me, but from the intercom. It was Gretchen. She said, "May I come up? I promise not to be long." My insides were tied in knots. Instead of pressing the speaker button, I just buzzed her in. Less than 2 minutes later, Gretchen was at my door. She was short, older, I'd believe closer to Jake's age than mine. Her style was nothing close to what I thought Jake would be into. She dressed in the fashion of a librarian or a schoolteacher. Thick glasses, her thin face only helped to accentuate the large circular frames around her mousy features. She had long auburn hair, a green long-sleeve shirt, and a floral skirt when she walked into my home. We shook hands. My first words were for confirmation. I'd already known, but... Gretchen, right? She says yes, but doesn't bother wasting the air I did. She knew my name, she knew my face, and she knew my address and apartment number, all thanks to Jake's text messages with me. Gretchen softly continued to hold my hand, then gestured me over to my own couch. She grabbed a wooden chair from the dining room table and placed it across from me. Then she sat down and stared into my eyes. Her expression was emotionless. Her eyebrows didn't furrow. Her lips didn't frown. She would preface her reasons for coming by, reassuring me that her hatred was not for me. Gretchen wanted repentance for the 14 years she'd given him. She was hungry for revenge. Spoken softly, with words in sharp contrast. Complete destruction, socially and financially. She wanted the bar. I was happy to oblige when she requested my participation in her plan. She agreed to purchase a cheap motel off of Highway 9, miles from town, for that Saturday. The room would be in my name. Then, I called him, putting the call on speaker. Gretchen remained stone-faced as she listened to her husband verbally defile the sanctity of their relationship. At first, he was adamant that he couldn't stay overnight with me, but by the end of the conversation, he told me that he'll try to get someone to cover his shift at the bar. That was the story he told me. Decoded, it means, I'll think of a lie to tell my wife. It was disgusting how quick a few seductive words convinced Jake to meet me that upcoming Saturday. I gave him the address and room number. We hang up, and Gretchen calls his phone a few minutes later. The tone of her voice now bright and chipper when Jake answers. She now puts her cell phone on speaker before asking him to pick up a blockbuster movie on the way home, and a few other small conversational pushes to see if anything in his inflection, tone, or cadence could be an admission of guilt. We're both surprised at how fast he decided to make something up to Gretchen about Saturday, most likely doing it over the phone to hide his lying face. He tells her something like corporate is making them take a refresher mixology course. It's for licensing purposes. The venue that they're holding it at is 3 hours away, so he would get a hotel instead of risking falling asleep at the wheel. Gretchen doesn't miss a breath when she wholeheartedly agrees that his safety is what she cares about. When their call ends, Gretchen stands up from the wooden chair and thanks me. When she leaves, it's the last time I see her in person until Saturday, but we stayed in contact, texting back and forth about what was going to happen. When the day arrives, Gretchen picks me up in the evening. We're expecting Jake to show up closer to midnight. She and I check into the hotel at 8, then go to dinner at a Mexican restaurant. When we get back to the motel, it's still way too early for Jake to be showing up. But when we drive to the back lot where our room faces, we both see the light in our room has been turned on. A light we swore we turned off before leaving. I park, the ignition turns down, and Gretchen says, "Wait, is he already here?" She's staring at the window. Through the blinds, we see someone's now walking around in our room. A large silhouette paces back and forth, then pauses in front of the window. Veiled, but their gaze most likely inspecting the parking lot for any changes in vacancy. This made Gretchen terribly upset, and a moment passed before she could stop her hands from shaking and regain her composure. Her original plan was for us to be in the room before he got there, but now it was plan B. Gretchen tells me that we're both just going to go in there and confront him. It's game time. Gretchen and I get out of the car and walk to the door. His shadow continues to pace back and forth in front of the thick beige curtains. I put the key in and open the door. When I look into the room, what I see is still a figure draped in black, as if a shadow had stood up and filled the dimensional gap. My sudden presence makes the figure dash up toward the ceiling. As I'm watching this happen, gunshots suddenly fire next to me, the loudest sound I've yet to experience, and the front window's glass is shattering. and Gretchen is screaming, "I hate you, I hate you." The scare sends me off my feet, and I start pushing myself backwards towards the car, while still witnessing Gretchen fire bullets into the motel room. She had a fucking gun. I remember thinking, this was not part of the plan. This was murder. Then she turns and screams, "Let's get out of here," while running for the car. I get up and start running too. We got to her car and we sped away before the other motel guests began coming outside. I was shook. On the ride home, I was already preparing a statement in my head for the police. But when Gretchen dropped me off at my apartment, I was sworn to secrecy and threatened with being an accomplice. An hour later, I'd receive a call from the motel. I acted dumbfounded when they told me that there had been a shooting on the premises. They were glad that I wasn't there at the time that it occurred. They also let me know I'd receive a full refund on the room. Jake would contact me next, sometime after 1 a.m., asking if I'm okay and telling me the motel got shot up. It would be documented and communicated that nobody was in the room at the time of the shooting. I told Jake, I know about Gretchen, and she knows about me, and I strongly recommend that he get himself somewhere far away from her and to never call me again. Neither myself or Gretchen have any idea what we saw that night. The motel was dingy and old. It definitely looked like a place that kept more than our secret hidden within its walls. I rarely tell this story because the subject matter, well, it puts everyone in such a poor light. Obviously, I had no idea that she had a gun. I'd never have agreed to it. I don't like Jake, but I didn't want him dead either. But seriously, who or what did we see in that room?